Hi there, welcome to another network automation video. Today I want to talk about Ansible troubleshooting. So it's an area that is one criticism of Ansible is that it can be tricky to troubleshoot, especially with its use of YAML to create the playbooks. And some people really hate YAML and find it very, very tricky to manage and troubleshoot. So I'm going to have a look at that. I'm still trying to keep these videos as close to 30 minutes as I can. So this is going to be a very high level kind of look at troubleshooting. It's only really going to scratch the surface. And I'm going to structure it around a couple of areas from personal experience, connection issues, an approach to troubleshoot your YAML, and then have a look at Jinja troubleshooting. Um, as I said, I'm only scratching the surface. You could create hours and hours of videos on troubleshooting, but hopefully this little intro will help some people. So just to get stuck in, I just want to start off with a review of my lab. This is the lab that I mostly use. Today I'm only really going to be connecting to site 2 switch 1 just to demonstrate the troubleshooting that I'm doing in this video. So let's start off. First of all, my host file. The thing to note here is that I'm not declaring my Ansible username and password in the host file. So what I'm doing is I've got a username. I'm logged in as DVN on this on the Ansible controller, and by default, if you don't declare a username and password, Ansible will assume that you're using the same username as what you're logged in as. I discussed this in my video on Ansible password management. So what I want here is I want to be prompted for the password. So this is configured in ansible.cfg. My own personal preference is I don't touch the Ansible CFG, the default one that's in the /etc/Ansible folder. I like to keep that clean, and in a playbook I'll copy down an Ansible CFG into my playbook directory is exactly what I've done here. So if we just more that file, you will see that there is a variable ask_pass, and if you uncomment this and set it to true, then you will be prompted for a password. So I have a simple YAML file called showcommands.yaml. As I said, this is just going to connect to site 2 switch 1. My descriptions here are incorrect, so let's just call it troubleshooting, just to be pedantic. And I'm just running two commands: show IP in brief and show NTP status. And in both instances, I registered the output to a variable and display the contents of that variable using the debug module. So if I just run that playbook, starting off, and it runs as expected. So NTP is not enabled, and there's my show IP in brief. So the first issue that I often see with Ansible is SSHing to a device. So the very basic troubleshooting steps is firstly ensure that SSH is enabled on the remote device, whether it's router, switch, firewall, or whatever. If you're automating brownfield environments, you might still have devices out there that are running Telnet. So Ansible doesn't support Telnet, so you'll need to get SSH enabled on those devices. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that when you SSH to a device, you're asked to accept the host key. By default, Ansible won't automatically accept that key. So you either SSH from the command line and manually accept it, or you tell Ansible to accept it. So in Linux, the host keys are stored in the home directory, which we can use the tilde to get to, in a hidden folder called .ssh. and in a file called known_hosts. So if we go in there, you can see that that switch that we're going to troubleshoot with today already has a host key in there. So if we just delete that and save the file, so let's just cap the file to verify it's gone. It's a blank file now. Now if we run our playbook again, we should hopefully get, very quickly we can see it's taking a little bit longer, so we're going to get an issue, and let's have a look at what Ansible tells us. I think it's about a 30-second timer here. All right, there we go. So in the message here, we see that Paramiko, which is the underlining SSH library that Ansible uses, has got an error message on our host 10.253.0.11, and it's an authenticity error message. We're being told we can't establish, and here's the fingerprint. So like if we, as I was saying, were to SSH directly to the device, 10.253.0.11, we expect to get asked to accept the key. We just say no there. If we go back to our ansible.cfg file, we can configure this behavior via the, I think it's auto host. Let's just search for that now. Host auto, nope. Let's just search for host. I always forget this. It's not something that you will do every day, but when I see it, I'll recognize it. And yeah, here we go. It's down the bottom here. It's host key auto add. So we set that, we uncomment it, and now when we run, Ansible should automatically in the background add that host key to our known host file, which we can just verify that it's back in there. So that's that one. The last one then on SSHing is just if you get your password wrong, right? It's going to be a pretty obvious output message here in this instance, but just a word of warning: if you're using AAA, generally AAA will only allow a certain number of failed attempts, and then it'll lock your account. So if you're making a change late at night and you run a playbook across a number of devices, it's not going to stop at the first host. It's going to try multiple hosts at the same time, and it'll lock your AAA account. So it's obvious here what the error is: failed to authenticate, authentication failed. If you have access to that AAA server and you can unlock your account, great. If you don't, you might have a failed change. So that's something else to watch out for there. So that's that one. So if we move on to YAML and just have a look at our playbook. So things to note here is that the way I have it structured here is that the two tasks align. So the dash name is on the same number of spaces, the same number of indents in. The iOS command is following the same structure in both commands, and likewise with commands and the actual command. So some of these are really important exactly where they're positioned, but some of them are not so important. So for instance, if we were to move commands to be very obviously in the wrong position and run our playbook, we might expect that to fail. But in fact, it doesn't care about that. It's going to run perfectly fine. However, if we were to change the indent of this one, and now it's not indented in relation to commands, then we might get different behavior. So we get an error message. So it says syntax error while loading YAML, did not find expected key. So that's a very to me anyway, obscure message, and it's not really telling me what the issue here is. It does say what the offending line is, and then maybe we can find it very easily. So if we correct that one, so we know that when we move this in, that's still going to work, and do the same here. This is also going to cause an issue. And again, we get a syntax error, but with a different message. This time it's saying did not find expected hyphen indicator. But if we look at the output here, a hyphen is not going to fix our problem here. So let's say we were to, just for sake of argument, think that that's what the issue was. We get a different issue, and this time we're getting no module action detected in task, and it's on the show NTP status. So we thought we were fixing the problem, but we're creating another problem, or we're kind of going around in circles here. So if we just correct it again, the last thing then is if you have a module like debug and you forget the hyphen, this time syntax error did not find expected hyphen. In this instance, putting the hyphen in is the fix. So you can see why people get frustrated here. Sometimes it's telling us what the fix is, but it's not actually the fix. So we'll just correct that again. I'll bring it back. Right. So in programming, and I don't claim to be a programmer, but there is a method for checking for errors and for syntax issues like we just seen here, called linting, or using a linter. And there's a tool called YAML Lint that we can run in our playbooks to check for errors. So that would be installed with pip3 install YAML Lint. I already have it installed. So if we were to run our YAML Lint command on our YAML file, it's going to find all of these errors for us. So if we just have a quick look at the YAML Lint website, you can see that that if we have a look at the default configuration, you can see all the things that it's checking for. So it's checking for let's see, indentation here, that's a key one, trailing spaces, new lines, what else, hyphens, empty lines, empty values, etc. This is the default, by default, what it's going to check for. And if we have a look, the output that it gives you is a line number and the number of spaces in, the number of indentations, and what the issue is. So in line 12, position 11, wrong indentation, expected 8 but found 10. So what it's telling us here is that in its default rules, the first indentation should always be 8 spaces in. That's not going to cause our playbook to fail if you go 10 and everything follows that, and that, you know, the preceding commands are indented further in than that first one, it's going to work. But what it does do is it does point you to where the issues are. So like for instance on line 2043 we've got a trailing spaces, so that again, that's not going to cause our playbook to fail. But if we look at line 20, we can just use set number to get our numbers, go to line 20 and position, I think it was position 43. You can see down here it tells us line 20 position 43 and we have a space after commands. Doesn't matter, our playbook still ran, but YAML Lint complained about it. If we run YAML Lint again, now that trailing spaces is gone. Likewise with too many blank lines, when I create my playbook directory, I put in blank lines to make it easier to read. So by default, YAML Lint has a rule on whatever number of blank lines it thinks is sufficient, but it doesn't stop your playbook for running. The ones that are important and the ones that I use are indentation and syntax errors. So if we put our syntax error back into our playbook, which would be this one, you can see now it says on line 19 position 6 we have a syntax error, expected block end but found block mapping start. That's to me that's a little bit more descriptive, because it's telling me that this line is not following the sequence of the previous line, because we wouldn't expect a block end there. So you can control what YAML Lint does with a conf file. So you can turn off, say, the trailing spaces, for instance, and that can be, you can call the file anything you like. I've just called it conf, and what I have here is start off with 3 hyphens to signify a YAML file. Then extends default. This means that I'm going to take the default rules of YAML Lint and I'm going to change them just by what I've configured in here. So in here I've disabled trailing spaces and I've disabled empty lines. So if I were to run my YAML Lint again, I think it's -C actually. So now I only have my indentation and my syntax errors. If you did want, you could actually remove that line, which means that we're only going to use the following rules. So let's say indentation, enable, and syntax. That's another option. Syntax, okay, it didn't like that one. So let's go back to YAML Lint, because I did want to show the rules as well. So here are all the rules. So syntax should be, I can't remember which one that was. So let's see, indentation, key ordering. Okay, that's not one, but key ordering is another one. So if you're declaring variables in your file, in your playbook file, and you specify in keys, say like here key 1, 2, 3. If you have them in the wrong order, it'll pick that up as well. They're the kind of things that it'll do. So that's YAML Lint. It's something that will help you with finding the indentation and syntax errors. So like if we were to look at this again, if I just put the extends default on again, syntax isn't one, so let's remove that. And what did I have? Trailing. executable. So we just look at some of these errors. So we've got line 19, we'll fix that first of all. So we indent that in one position. Run YAML Lint again, indentation, too many blank lines, say row 25. Just delete that last blank line. Again, it doesn't matter, but just to show. Now we've just got indentations. So like row 12, let's have a look, it should be 8. So we can bring that back to here and just shows you how you can go through each of these, correct them. If you wanted to correct all of them, you could, but like the ones, as I said, that I look out for is very obvious errors, which is normally those syntax ones. So that's a tool to troubleshoot your YAML of your playbook directory. So I'm going to move on to the last thing now, which is Jinja. So I have a Jinja template, a Jinja playbook, and what it does is it declares a list of dictionary called VLANs in a vars directory. Again, it's still only running on site 2 switch 1, and it's got the template module to generate the Jinja template. It saves it in an output directory of my playbook directory and puts the device host name in front of --my_template.conf, and then it deploys that to our routers. So the first bit of advice here is that if you're creating Jinja templates for the first time, is hash out your deploy. You don't want to deploy anything until you're satisfied that it's definitely correct. So let's just do that and run this other one. So I've created an error here deliberately just to show that some of these messages again are quite descriptive. Destination directory.output does not exist. So you could use an Ansible module to create that and maybe delete it afterwards, but I'm just going to create it here manually and run my script again. So now it's generating some config and it's saving it in my output directory. So let's firstly have a look at my templates. So I've got a main.conf that I'm calling 3 Jinja templates. An ACL template where I'm going to configure 2 ACLs. One of the ACLs is going to be assigned to in the input direction to just one of the VLANs, and the other ACL is going to be used for a NAT configuration for one of the other VLANs. So just looking at the ACL.jinja, there's my 2 simple VLANs, and then the other ones, VLAN. So I loop through VLANs, I check if the VLAN ID is 10, and I configure the VLAN 100 in the input directory. So quite simple. And the last one is NAT. So I'm configuring the overload command for VLAN 20, looping through the VLANs, finding VLAN 20 and applying IPNAT inside. Very easy. So if we just look at what we have created, we can see the first error. So when we combine these 3 templates, the first one, access list 100, is applied OK. The second one, access list 199, is applied, and then we don't get a new line and we have interface 10 applied. So Jinja is very particular here, and it can be very frustrating to troubleshoot Jinja, even more so than YAML in my own experience, because it basically, the best advice I can give is that Jinja ACL, sorry, templates and VI ACL. So I was going to say the best advice I can give is that Jinja is going to just print everything you tell it to print. So every little space that you put in, it's gonna, or lack of, it's gonna print. So in this instance, the first template prints exactly this, no new line, and the second template starts where the first one finished. So after this last W here. So we need to put in a new line. So if we put in a new line and an exclamation mark, the exact same thing is going to happen. We would have our exclamation mark and then our interface here. So we need a new line as well. And now it's going to start on our new line. The same is true when you're calling variables. So sometimes we might have a need to call two variables, one after the other. So let's just say we were configuring an IP address. We might go IP address 10 dot, and then say we're using the site ID first element of it, and then we want a dot and site ID, say second element. Say you're doing something like that. If I just scroll down, this is correct format, so you get 10 dot whatever this number is, dot whatever this number is, and we haven't finished it off. But if you were to do something like this, a space like that, and what Jinja will do is it will apply exactly this sequence: a dot, then a space, then the next number. And when you apply that configuration, it's going to fail. And while it might be very obvious in this simple example, if you're doing a long deployment, lots of different Jinja templates, and you have little spaces in there like that, one little space, extra space, can break the whole deployment. So it is very frustrating. So let's just delete that, and we'll should be able to just scroll up. Let's run it again. Right, and let's have a look what we got generated this time. So now it looks a bit better. Access lists are okay. We have our exclamation mark here. Interface VLAN 10. We have applied our access group. We don't have an explanation mark here, and we're running this IPNAT inside global configuration command. But as you know, when you're in when you're in interface mode, if you put a global configuration command in, it will accept it and move you back into global configuration mode. So generally this is okay. So we might decide, okay, we're fine here. Interface VLAN 20 is okay, and we apply IPNAT inside. But there is a deliberate mistake in here. The command is actually supposed to be at this point here, list 199 interface VLAN 20. So I've left the interface bit out, so that command is going to fail. So say we have a notice that, and we decide we're going to now look to deploy. So let's VI templates and hash out. Just align it up and see what happens. So it should generate, and let's see how it handles that error message. So now we get a lot of output, but what you need to focus for when you're deploying config, the thing that I usually look out for is this invalid input detected at which we would see when we're in configuration mode and if we put in a wrong command, and we can see that it's IPNAT source list 199 VLAN 20 overload, and then IPNAT inside source list 199 VLAN 20. And anyway, it's got this error message, but the reason why I would recommend that when you're testing Jinja, the first thing you should do is test in a lab. Then when you're happy that it works in a lab, test on just one host. When you test on one host, then you need to test each different model of device that you have. So if you've got different router models, for instance, they might have different interface numbering, and that could cause your script to fail. And not until you gone through those steps would you be ready to then roll it out into production. And the reason for that recommendation is if we were to look at our router, we failed, but VLAN 10, the access group 100 in was configured. Show run pipe int access list. Our two access lists were applied. Oops, ignore that. IPNAT inside was applied. Now the IPNAT inside source list 199, that's there because I've just realized I forgot to remove it when I was testing this before I made this video. So if I just IPNAT inside source list 199, I'm just going to remove this and run it again. I think that's probably enough. Just going to remove everything. No IP inside. So no access list 100 and 199. Okay, so it's clean. So I had forgotten to tidy up. So let's just run that again. So I can demonstrate what the issue here is. So I expect it to fail again with that command being incorrect. But what I want to show is show run pipe int. The two access lists were configured correctly. Access list 100 was correctly applied to VLAN 10, but VLAN 20 doesn't have the NAT configured, and in fact there shouldn't be any NAT configured at all. So that's why this is quite dangerous. If you're deploying a large config and halfway through you have a syntax error and it causes it to fail at that point, it will not apply all the config afterwards. So you're gonna have a situation where half your config is deployed, and that could have very undesirable results. And if you've now done that to 100 devices, now you have undesirable results in 100 of your routers or switches or whatever, which would be really, really bad. So it's very, very important that you step through testing of Jinja until you're satisfied, 100% satisfied that it's ready for production network, and of course going through change control as well. So if we, as a final thing, we go back to our templates and our VLAN NAT, let's correct the problem. It's interface here. So hopefully it'll all apply correctly this time. So it generates the config, and now it's got the interface, and now it's successfully deployed. So if we look at VLAN, show run VLAN 20 now, we have NAT inside, and just looking at all our NAT, we have the correct global command as well. So that's something to watch out for. So just to summarize, I know that's very brief. I'm at just over 35 minutes now, so there's a lot more to it, but that's just some tips to what to look out for initially. I've also summarized what I talked about here today. So in connection troubleshooting, using the ask pass, not really a troubleshooting tip as such, but that's in the Ansible CFG file. I turned on the host key auto add in the Ansible CFG file as well, so that the host key, the SSH host key, is automatically accepted by Ansible. And then also you need to verify the remote host is SSH enabled. Do you have an access list configured? And make sure that if you're creating a new Linux server to run Ansible, that you put it in your management VLAN, so you don't have to manually go around and update your V2I ACL. Then with YAML Lint, it's important to understand the indentation rules. Some of them doesn't really matter if one task's indentation doesn't line up with another task's indentation, but some others it's really important. When you have your dash name and you're calling a module, that has to be indented exactly, or it will complain and fail to run. And install YAML Lint. I think it's a good tool, and a lot of people actually use YAML Lint as part of their automated testing, and they won't run their playbook unless the YAML Lint has returned no errors. The ones that I generally focus in on is the indentation and the syntax errors. They're the ones primarily that will call out issues I'll have with my playbook. And then finally, Jinja. Jinja is really tricky to troubleshoot if you're dealing with large Jinja files. It can be quite tricky. I'm not aware of any tools that can check for syntax like YAML Lint. Maybe they're out there. If there is, please comment. I'd love to hear about it. But what I say about Jinja is it's so important that you first test in a lab, then only on one host in a controlled environment, and test all of your model types so that you get the variances in the hardware, whether it's interface numbering or whatever, before you consider a production rollout. So that's really important. So look, that wraps up my my video now. I hope it's some help to people out there, and thank you very much.